walls screamed, like a living entity. The station's ancient metal groaned and reverberated with every movement, as if angry at its only occupant. Victor Dane didn't flinch. He was too tired for fear, and there was no one else left to hear it. If this dying place wanted to haunt him, it would have to do better than eerie noises. He tightened his grip on the plasma torch, staring down the corroded bulkhead that stood between him and breathable air. Before we dive into Victor's fight to survive, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. Let us know how you defy the odds of stranded in the void. Now, back to the story. Victor's breath hitched as his makeshift oxygen supply beeped a sharp warning. 1 hour left. He wiped a grimy glove across his sweat-streaked faceplate. Time to move faster. The alien station was massive, labyrinthine, and utterly unforgiving. Its air filtration systems had failed decades, centuries ago, and its inhabitants were long dead or fled. Yet here he was, a single human engineer abandoned by a collapsing alliance in a moment of betrayal he couldn't stop replaying in his mind. The mission had been simple: repair a critical data relay in orbit around a collapsing star. The alien station, left derelict and forgotten, was an intermediary for long-lost empires. Victor was supposed to patch a single terminal, grab his creds, and leave. But someone had sabotaged his ship. It exploded as soon as he docked, taking his crewmates and his exit strategy with it. Now, he was alone, walking through a graveyard of a civilization he didn't recognize, haunted by the nagging thought that the sabotage wasn't random. Someone wanted him here. The bulkhead hissed open, releasing a plume of metallic-tasting gas that clung to Victor's helmet. His torch flickered, its light dancing across walls adorned with geometric carvings, alien symbols whose meaning evaded him but whispered of purpose. Behind the door lay a cavernous chamber, rows of machinery stretching into shadows so thick even his visor couldn't pierce them. He stepped forward, the crunch of debris beneath his boots echoing ominously. The room felt alive, as if it watched him. Every sound, every flicker of motion in his peripheral vision raised the hairs on the back of his neck. He approached the nearest console, its surface coated in dust that hadn't been disturbed in ages. Swiping it clean, he found a control panel, a mix of holographic projections and physical levers that hummed faintly as if yearning to be touched. His engineer's instincts took over. The design was alien, but he saw its logic. Systems were universal. Power grids, resource management, ventilation controls. If he could bring even a fraction of this place back online, he might survive long enough to call for help, or to understand why someone had trapped him here. Hours passed as he worked, the oxygen warning shifting from 1 hour to critical. Just as the room's life support system spluttered to life, he collapsed against the console, gasping as stale, breathable air flooded his helmet. But as the station woke, so did something else. Lights flickered across the chamber, illuminating forgotten passageways. Shadows shifted unnaturally, and the hum of power coursing through the walls grew into a roar. Victor's eyes darted to the console. Its readings were erratic, showing no clear system diagnostics. Yet one word, written in alien script, kept appearing on the screen. Activate. Victor hesitated, his finger hovering over the pulsing alien glyph. It blinked with an insistent rhythm, as if alive, urging him to obey. Activate was the only discernible word in a sea of incomprehensible symbols, and something about it set his teeth on edge. Was it a command, a request, or a warning? His instinct screamed to leave it alone, but logic was louder. The station was dead or close enough, and without full power, he'd die with it. With a deep breath, Victor pressed a glyph. The room came alive with violent purpose. Light surged to blinding intensity before dimming to a steady glow. Machinery that had lain dormant for eons shuddered and whirred, filling the air with a symphony of mechanical life. Then the ground trembled. Victor scrambled back, heart pounding, as a section of the floor split open to reveal a rising platform. On it stood a cylindrical pod, its surface pristine, and untouched by time. Strange. Alien characters crawled across its surface like holographic veins, shifting and shimmering too quickly for Victor to read. The pod hissed, releasing a cloud of cold vapor that enveloped the room. Victor's visor fogged, and for one horrifying moment, he thought the air might be toxic again. But the fog dissipated quickly, and he stared in awe at the pod. It began to unfold like a metallic flower, its petals revealing something or someone within. A humanoid figure, impossibly tall and skeletal, lay curled in a fetal position. Its skin was translucent, glowing faintly with an inner light that pulsed in time with the station's power. As the pod opened further, the figure's eyes snapped open, blazing with a piercing golden hue that made Victor stagger backward. It moved, slowly at first, its elongated limbs uncurling, as if waking from a deep slumber. When it stood, it towered over Victor, its gaze fixed on him with an intensity that felt almost predatory. "You!" The creature spoke, its voice resonating directly in Victor's mind. The word wasn't spoken in English or any language Victor knew, but the meaning was unmistakable. Victor's throat went dry. "Me," he managed, his voice a croak. The creature tilted its head, observing him with an unsettling mix of curiosity and disdain. "Why awaken us?" The question hit Victor like a physical blow. He hadn't considered the possibility that the station wasn't abandoned, that someone had been waiting here all along. "I didn't," he stammered. "I didn't know you were here. I was trying to survive." The creature's golden eyes narrowed. "Survive? You tamper with what you do not understand. This place is not for you." Victor bristled despite himself. This place was abandoned. I had no choice. His voice rose, frustration and fear intertwining. "My ship was destroyed. I'm trapped here. If I hadn't done something, I'd be dead by now." The creature regarded him in silence for a long moment. Then it extended a spindly hand, palm up, as if inviting him to come closer. Against every instinct screaming at him to run, Victor stepped forward. When their hands met, Victor's mind was flooded with images, fractured memories that weren't his. He saw a thriving alien civilization, this station at its heart. He saw war, devastation, and the desperate decision to seal the station and its secrets away. He saw betrayal. And then he saw something terrifyingly familiar. Humans, not explorers, but soldiers, invaders. The connection broke, and Victor stumbled back, gasping for air. What was that? The creature loomed over him, its expression unreadable. "You are the same," it said, its voice a whisper that seemed to echo in the cavernous room. "Your kind destroyed us, and now you awaken us again to finish the job." "No," Victor shouted, panic rising. "I'm not like them. I didn't even know you existed until now." The creature's gaze softened, but only slightly. "Perhaps, but you are here, and that cannot be undone." Before Victor could respond, the station trembled again. Lights flickered and a deep, guttural sound echoed through the walls. A sound that was not mechanical. "What was that?" Victor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The creature turned its golden eyes toward the darkness beyond the chamber. "Something stirs," it said, "and it is hungry." The low growl reverberated through the station, a primal sound that made Victor's stomach churn. He froze, every instinct screaming at him to flee. But the alien creature before him stood utterly still, its glowing eyes fixed on the darkness. "What's hungry?" Victor asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted the answer. The creature didn't respond immediately. Instead, it tilted its head, as if listening to something Victor couldn't hear. When it finally spoke, its tone was grave. "They are the remnants, shadows of what we were, left behind when we sealed this place. And now they wake." Victor swallowed hard, his mouth dry. "Why would you leave, remnants?" The creature turned its piercing gaze back to him. "We didn't leave them. They are what became of us. those who refuse the transformation. Victor blinked. Transformation? What transformation? The creature ignored his question, moving with sudden urgency toward the console Victor had reactivated. Its elongated fingers danced over the controls, inputting commands faster than Victor's eyes could follow. Symbols lit up across the room's surfaces, their meaning just as cryptic as before, but the station's hum grew louder, its systems coming fully online. "You have little time, human," the creature said. "If they reach you, they will consume you. And worse, they will escape." "Escape? What do you mean?" Victor demanded. But his voice was drowned out by a deafening crash. Somewhere deep in the station, metal screamed as if being torn apart. The creature's expression darkened. "They are coming." Victor's mind raced. He didn't understand half of what the alien was saying, but he didn't need a translator to grasp the urgency. Whatever was coming, he wasn't equipped to fight it. He didn't even know what it was. "What do we do?" he asked, his voice trembling despite his effort to stay calm. The alien straightened, its towering frame casting long shadows across the room. "You will not survive them," it said, its tone matter-of-fact. "But you may still serve a purpose." Victor bristled. "I'm not sacrificing myself for your mistakes." The alien tilted its head again, studying him with that same unnerving intensity. "You misunderstand. Your survival is advantageous. But only if you listen." Another crash, closer this time. Victor's heart raced as the sound of skittering, fast, irregular, inhuman, filled the air. The alien stepped closer to him, its glowing eyes locking onto his. "The station is a weapon," it said. "A prison. It can destroy them, but only if it is fully restored." Victor blinked. "Wait, you're saying this entire place is a weapon?" "Yes," the alien replied, "but it is incomplete. We lack the time, the knowledge. Your kind, destructive as they are, possess ingenuity we did not." The backhanded compliment stung, but Victor didn't have time to argue. "What do you need me to do?" The alien pointed to a cluster of symbols on the console. "The power core. It must be reconnected to the central network. The path will be dangerous. But if you succeed, the remnants will be contained. And if I don't?" Victor asked, though he already knew the answer. The alien didn't reply. It didn't need to. Another crash, followed by an otherworldly screech that made Victor's blood run cold. He could feel the vibrations of whatever was coming, the tremors rattling the floor beneath his boots. "Go," the alien said, its voice sharp and commanding. "I will slow them." Victor hesitated for only a moment. "What about you?" "I was made to endure," the alien replied. "You were not." Victor didn't wait for further explanation. He turned and ran, clutching his plasma torch like a lifeline. The corridors of the station were a maze, but the console's display had etched the path to the power core into his visor. It was his only guide, a flickering map that updated with every step. As he sprinted through the station, the screeches grew louder, more numerous. He could hear the remnants now, chittering, scraping sounds that echoed off the walls. They were close, too close, and his every instinct screamed that he wouldn't make it. The corridor opened into another vast chamber, this one dominated by a colossal structure that could only be the power core. Its sheer size took his breath away, a swirling mass of light and machinery suspended in midair, held together by energy fields that crackled and pulsed with raw power. But something was wrong. The core was dim, its light flickering weakly. Several of its connection points were severed, their conduits hanging uselessly like torn ligaments. Victor didn't have time to marvel at the sight. He ran to the nearest conduit, his engineer's mind already racing through possibilities. He would need to reroute power manually, bridge the gaps, and stabilize the core, all while whatever was hunting him closed in. As he worked, the remnants finally arrived. The screeches echoed like a storm, their intensity shaking Victor to his core. The first glimpse of the remnants was worse than anything he could have imagined. Emerging from the shadows of the corridor behind him, They moved like nightmares, half solid, half shadow, their forms shifting with unnatural fluidity. Their limbs were jagged and asymmetrical, claws scraping across the walls as if testing their solidity. Victor's stomach churned as his eyes locked onto their faces, or what passed for faces. They had no eyes, only gaping voids where light seemed to disappear. Mouths too wide and filled with jagged teeth opened in silent roars, though their screeches pierced the air like banshees. He forced himself to focus, gripping the conduit tightly as he connected it to the power core's interface. Sparks flew, and the core responded with a low hum, its light growing slightly brighter. "Come on," Victor muttered under his breath, his fingers working furiously. The remnants didn't wait. They surged forward, their movements unervingly fast, like insects descending on prey. Victor's heart hammered in his chest as he grabbed his plasma torch, turning it toward the nearest one. The beam of superheated energy sliced through the air, striking the creature squarely in what should have been its torso. The remnants hissed and recoiled, but the wound closed almost instantly, the dark material of its body reforming as if the attack had never happened. Victor stumbled back, swearing under his breath. They weren't just hard to kill, they were impossible. The alien's words echoed in his mind. The station is a weapon, it can destroy them. He had no choice but to finish the repairs. Another conduit sparked to life under his desperate hands, and the power core responded with a surge of energy. The room lit up, casting harsh shadows that danced across the walls. The remnants hesitated, their forms flickering as if disrupted by the light. That's it, Victor realized. They hate the light. He grabbed the final conduit, sweat pouring down his face despite the station's frigid air. The remnants advanced again, their movements more cautious but no less relentless. One of them lunged, its clawed hand slamming into the floor inches from Victor's leg. "Not today," he shouted, jamming the conduit into place. The power core roared to life, its energy field flaring with blinding intensity. The remnants shrieked, their forms writhing and distorting as the light consumed them. One by one, they dissolved into nothingness, their screams fading into silence. Victor collapsed to his knees, gasping for breath. The room was eerily quiet now, the power core's steady hum the only sound. He stared at it, awestruck by its sheer magnitude. The alien hadn't lied. This station wasn't just a tool. It was a masterpiece of engineering, a weapon capable of obliterating forces beyond comprehension. But his relief was short-lived. His visor flickered with a warning. Energy spike detected. System overload imminent. Victor's eyes widened. "Oh, come on!" The power core, now fully operational, was destabilizing. Its energy output climbed exponentially, the readings on Victor's display flashing red. If he didn't act fast, the core would take the entire station and him with it. He forced himself to his feet, his mind racing for a solution. The core's controls were alien, but he could see the logic in their design. He needed to vent the excess energy, but the process wasn't automated. Someone or something would have to manually regulate the flow. As he approached the console, a familiar figure stepped into the room. "The alien, you succeeded," it said, its voice carrying both relief and grim determination. "But the core is unstable. It must be controlled." Victor shook his head. "If you knew this would happen, why didn't you warn me?" "There was no time," the alien replied. "And it changes nothing. The station must be preserved. You must survive." Victor's stomach dropped. "What are you saying?" The alien stepped past him, its elongated fingers already moving across the console. "I will stabilize the core," it said. "You must reach the escape pod. Now." Victor froze. "No, you'll die." The alien turned to him, its glowing eyes filled with an emotion Victor couldn't quite place. "This is my purpose. My creators made me to protect this station, even at the cost of myself." Victor clenched his fists. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," the alien said firmly. You are the only one who can leave. The only one who can ensure the knowledge of what happened here is not lost. Another tremor shook the station, and the power core's hum grew deafening. Victor's instincts screamed at him to run, but his feet remained planted. "You saved me," he said quietly. "Let me save you." The alien's expression softened. "You already have. Now go." Victor hesitated for only a moment longer before turning and running. As he raced through the station's corridors, the alien's final words echoed in his mind. "Ensure the knowledge is not lost." Victor sprinted through the labyrinth of corridors, his legs burning as he pushed himself forward. The station's tremors intensified, each quake threatening to knock him off balance. Overhead, warning lights flashed red, and a synthesized voice droned in an alien language he couldn't understand. It didn't matter. He knew what it meant. Time was running out. The path to the escape pod bay appeared on his visor, a flickering trail guiding him through the chaos. Behind him, the power core's energy surge grew more violent, a low rumble that resonated through the station like a building storm. He didn't dare look back. Rounding a corner, Victor nearly collided with a fallen support beam blocking the corridor. He cursed under his breath, dropping to his knees and scrambling under the jagged debris. As he emerged on the other side, he heard it, the remnants. The screeches were faint at first, like echoes in the distance, but they grew louder with every passing second. Victor's chest tightened. He thought the power core's activation had destroyed them, but something told him they weren't so easily defeated. "Not now," he muttered, forcing himself to move faster. The escape pod bay came into view, a massive chamber lined with sleek, pod-like vessels designed for evacuation. Most were in disrepair, their outer shells cracked and covered in alien growths, but one at the far end glowed faintly with power. Victor sprinted toward it, his breath ragged. Behind him, the screeches became a cacophony, and he could hear the remnants closing in. They didn't move like living creatures. There was no rhythm to their steps, only erratic bursts of speed that made his skin crawl. Victor reached the active pod and slammed his hand against the control panel. The door hissed open, revealing a cramped interior filled with unfamiliar controls. He climbed inside, pulling the door shut just as the first remnant lunged at him. Its claws scraped against the pod's surface, leaving deep gouges that made Victor's heart skip a beat. He strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands trembling as he scanned the console. The controls were alien, but their layout was intuitive enough for him to guess their functions. He found the launch sequence and activated it, the pod vibrating as its systems roared to life. The remnants outside shrieked in fury, their distorted forms pounding against the pod's exterior. One of them managed to latch onto the viewport, its face pressing against the glass. Victor recoiled, the sight of its void-like eyes sending a jolt of fear through him. With a deafening roar, the escape pod launched. The force pinned Victor against his seat, and the remnants were ripped away as the pod accelerated through the station's launch tube. He caught one last glimpse of the station, a massive, intricate structure glowing with energy, before the viewport filled with the darkness of space. Victor's breath came in shallow gasps as he tried to process what had just happened. The alien, the remnants, the station. It all felt surreal, like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But the hum of the escape pod systems reminded him that this was all too real. As the pod drifted away, a brilliant light erupted behind him. He turned to see the station, its core blazing like a miniature sun. For a moment, it was beautiful, an awe-inspiring testament to the ingenuity of its creators. Then it imploded. The station folded in on itself, its massive structure collapsing in a cascade of energy. The shockwave hit the pod moments later, sending it spinning uncontrollably. Victor clung to his seat, the straps digging into his shoulders as alarms blared around him. When the chaos finally subsided, he found himself drifting in silence. The station was gone, replaced by a swirling field of debris and glowing particles. Victor stared at the void, his mind numb. The alien's final words echoed in his thoughts. Ensure the knowledge is not lost. He opened the pod's data terminal, searching for anything it might have recorded. To his surprise, the terminal was packed with files, schematics, logs, and encrypted messages. The alien had planned this. It had ensured Victor wouldn't leave empty-handed. A lump formed in his throat as he realized the weight of the responsibility he now carried. The station's destruction wasn't just the end of its story. It was the beginning of a new one. Victor leaned back in his seat, staring out at the stars. He didn't know where the pod was taking him, or if anyone would believe his story when he arrived. But one thing was certain. He couldn't let the knowledge die with him. The escape pod systems hummed softly as it drifted through the vast expanse of space. Victor sat in silence, his gaze fixed on the faint glow of the pod's navigation console. He had no idea where it was taking him, but the calm after the chaos felt almost surreal. The station's destruction, the remnants, the alien who had sacrificed itself. It all played over and over in his mind like a broken recording. He clenched his fists, frustration bubbling up inside him. What had been the point of it all? The alien's cryptic warnings, its insistence that he survive, and the station's treasure trove of data. None of it made sense without context. Victor leaned forward, his fingers hovering over the pod's terminal. The files the alien had left him were vast, far too many to comb through manually. But one stood out. A simple log marked with a symbol he recognized from the station's control room. He tapped it. A holographic projection flickered to life in the pod's cramped interior, casting a pale blue glow over the walls. The image of the alien appeared, its towering form slightly distorted by static. "If you are seeing this," it began, its voice calm and measured, "then I have succeeded in ensuring your survival. My creators would have approved, though I cannot claim to understand the intricacies of their choices." Victor frowned. The alien's tone was different, less formal, almost reflective. "This station," it continued, "was our greatest achievement, a culmination of eons of progress, designed to imprison a force we could neither destroy nor comprehend. The remnants are but fragments of that force, broken pieces of a whole that once threatened to consume entire worlds." Victor's blood ran cold. "Consume worlds," he muttered to himself. The alien's projection shifted, its expression unreadable. "We sought to harness what we could not defeat, to turn its power into a weapon that would protect us. But in doing so, we became something else. Something less." Victor's stomach tightened as he recalled the alien's earlier words. "They are what became of us, the remnants of the price of our ambition," the alien said. "And the station's destruction was the only way to ensure they would not escape. But you, human, have a gift my kind lacked. You adapt, you create, you destroy. It is why I entrusted you with this knowledge." The projection paused, as if giving Victor time to process its words. "Our failure must not be repeated," the alien concluded. "The data within this pod contains everything we learned, our successes, our mistakes, and the truths we uncovered. Use it wisely, for your kind will face the same choices we did. And when that time comes, perhaps you will find a path we could not." The hologram faded, leaving Victor alone with his thoughts. He exhaled slowly, the weight of the alien's message pressing down on him. The station hadn't just been a prison, it had been a warning. And now, that warning was his burden to carry. Victor leaned back in his seat, staring at the data terminal. The files were a puzzle, pieces of a story he barely understood. But he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about survival. It was about ensuring humanity didn't repeat the mistakes of the past. The pod's navigation system chimed, pulling him from his thoughts. A holographic display lit up, showing a distant planet surrounded by orbiting satellites. The system identified it as Haven 42, a human colony on the outskirts of known space. Relief washed over Victor, but as the pod approached the planet, something felt off. The colony's satellites were dark, their signals weak and erratic. The surface below was shrouded in thick clouds, and the faint glow of city lights was nowhere to be seen. Victor's pulse quickened, The pod systems detected no immediate threats, but the silence was unnerving. He activated the comms, broadcasting a standard distress signal. "This is Victor Kerr, civilian engineer aboard Escape Pod Alpha 19, requesting permission to dock at Haven 42. Does anyone copy?" Static. He tried again, cycling through different frequencies. "Haven 42, this is Alpha 19. Please respond." More static. Victor gritted his teeth, his fingers drumming nervously on the console. The pod's navigation system indicated an automated docking platform ahead, but the lack of communication made his skin crawl. As the pod descended toward the colony, the clouds parted, revealing a landscape that sent a chill down his spine. The cities below were dark, their towering spires abandoned and overgrown. Roads that should have been bustling with activity were empty, reclaimed by nature. "What the hell happened here?" Victor muttered, his eyes scanning the desolate terrain. The pod landed with a soft thud on the docking platform, its systems hissing as they powered down. Victor hesitated, his hand hovering over the release lever for the hatch. Every instinct told him to stay inside, but curiosity, and the alien's parting words, pushed him forward. He pulled the lever. The hatch opened with a low hiss, and the stale air of the colony greeted him. Victor stepped out cautiously, his plasma torch in one hand and a portable scanner in the other. The platform was eerily quiet, the only sounds coming from the distant rustle of wind and the faint hum of the pod's cooling systems. Victor activated the scanner, sweeping it across the area. The readings were strange, faint traces of energy that didn't match any known human technology. As he moved deeper into the docking facility, he found signs of a struggle. Scorch marks lined the walls, and broken machinery littered the floor. But there were no bodies, no signs of what had happened to the colony's inhabitants. Victor's grip on the torch tightened as a low, rhythmic hum echoed through the facility. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a shiver down his spine. He followed the sound, his scanner's readings spiking as he approached a massive doorway marked with alien symbols. The door slid open, revealing a chamber filled with strange machinery. In the center of the room stood a device that pulsed with an eerie, otherworldly light. Victor's breath caught in his throat. The energy signature matched the remnants. Victor's first instinct was to back away. The pulsing device exuded a malevolence that made his skin crawl, its glow casting ominous, flickering shadows across the walls. But something held him in place, a gut feeling, a whisper of curiosity and dread combined. This was no mere coincidence. Whatever had befallen Haven 42, this alien relic was at the center of it. His scanner beeped furiously, its readings fluctuating as though struggling to make sense of the energy. Victor stepped closer, the light intensifying with each cautious step. The air grew heavier, crackling faintly, and a strange warmth emanated from the device. He circled it, careful not to touch the intricately designed surface. The structure resembled a fusion of organic and mechanical elements, veins of glowing energy coursing through its frame like a living organism. But what truly caught his attention was a faint hum that seemed to form a rhythm, almost like a heartbeat. Victor crouched down, running the scanner over the base of the device. The readings spiked dramatically, and an alert flashed across his visor. Foreign neural link detected. Warning: high synchronization risk. Neural link? He muttered, his brow furrowing. He glanced around the chamber, noticing for the first time the faint outlines of human-sized shapes etched into the walls. They weren't just symbols. They were figures, humanoid forms frozen mid-motion, their expressions etched in terror. Victor's stomach churned. Had these been the colony's inhabitants? A low rumble shook the chamber, snapping him out of his thoughts. The device's pulsing intensified, its rhythm growing faster. Victor backed away instinctively, gripping his plasma torch. Then the light dimmed and the chamber fell silent. Victor froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. The sudden stillness was unnerving, and for a moment he wondered if the device had shut down. But the hum returned, softer this time, accompanied by a faint, distorted whisper. "Victor!" He spun around, his torch held high, but the room was empty. "Who's there?" he demanded, his voice echoing off the walls. No response. Only the whisper persisted, indistinct and layered, as though 1,000 voices were speaking at once. Victor's visor flickered, static distorting his view. The scanner in his hand crackled and died, the display going dark. Panic clawed at the edges of his mind, but he forced himself to stay calm. Whatever was happening, it was tied to the device. He took a tentative step forward, his eyes locked on the pulsating relic. The whispering grew louder, resolving into fragmented words that he could almost understand. "Help us release," Victor gritted his teeth, his mind racing. Were these the voices of the colony's inhabitants? Or something else entirely? The device flared to life, its glow enveloping the chamber. Victor shielded his eyes as a surge of energy shot out, striking the walls and illuminating the humanoid figures. They moved. Victor stumbled back, his heart pounding as the once frozen forms stepped out of the walls, their movements jerky and unnatural. Their faces were expressionless, their eyes empty voids that glowed faintly with the same eerie light as the device. "Stay back," Victor shouted, raising his torch. The figures didn't respond. They advanced slowly, their heads tilting unnaturally as though studying him. Victor's mind raced. These weren't remnants, at least not like the ones on the station. They seemed incomplete, as if they were echoes of the people they once were. He activated the torch, the bright flame casting sharp shadows across the chamber. The figures halted, recoiling slightly from the light. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give Victor an idea. Keeping the torch raised, he edged toward the device. If he could disable it or destroy it, maybe he could stop whatever was happening. The whispering voices grew frantic, their fragmented pleas overlapping in a chaotic cacophony. "Don't destroy, save," Victor hesitated, his hand hovering over the plasma torch's power dial. The alien's words echoed in his mind. "Ensure the knowledge is not lost." But could this device really be a source of knowledge? Or was it a weapon, like the remnants on the station? A sudden shriek shattered his thoughts. One of the figures lunged at him, its movements unervingly fast. Victor ducked, the torch's flames slicing through the air and grazing the figure's side. It let out a distorted howl, its form dissolving into a cloud of ash-like particles. The other figures paused, their heads tilting in unison. Victor seized the moment, sprinting toward the device. He scanned its surface, searching for anything resembling a control panel. His fingers brushed against a small, recessed compartment, and it opened with a soft click. Inside was a crystalline interface, its surface shimmering with symbols that shifted and rearranged themselves. Victor's engineering instincts kicked in. He recognized patterns in the symbols, sequences that mirrored the station systems. This wasn't just a relic. It was a conduit, a link to something far greater. The figures began advancing again, their movements growing more aggressive. Victor worked quickly, deciphering the interface and overriding its security protocols. The chamber shook violently as the device's glow intensified. The figures stopped mid-step, their forms flickering like static. Victor's visor displayed a warning. Energy surge imminent. Evacuate immediately. He hesitated, his hands hovering over the interface. If he left now, the device might detonate, taking the entire colony with it. But if he stayed, the whispers returned, louder and more coherent. "Free us or destroy us," Victor's breath caught. This wasn't just about the colony. Whatever was linked to this device was trapped, alive, sentient, and suffering. He made his choice. Victor activated the device's failsafe, his fingers dancing across the interface. The glow shifted, its intensity dimming as the energy stabilized. The figures froze, their forms dissolving into particles that swirled around the chamber before vanishing. The device powered down, its hum fading into silence. Victor sank to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. But as he looked up, he noticed something new. The walls of the chamber were no longer etched with terror. Instead, they glowed faintly, displaying a map of the galaxy marked with countless points of light. Victor stared, realization dawning. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a journey he couldn't have imagined. Victor stood amidst the dimly lit chamber, his breathing ragged. The holographic map shimmered across the walls, each point of light glowing with quiet urgency. He couldn't tear his eyes away. Each mark felt like a destination, a call to action. But the meaning behind them was still a mystery. Were they remnants of the alien empire? Colonies like Haven 42? Or something entirely different? He reached out, and the map reacted, zooming in on a cluster of lights in the outer reaches of the galaxy. One blinked red, a stark contrast to the serene blue of the others. His visor translated a single alien symbol that appeared alongside it. Distress. Victor's heart sank. If these markers represented alien technology or remnants, then another colony, possibly another entire planet, could be in danger. His scanner flickered back to life, syncing with the map. A notification chimed softly, displaying a decrypted file from the alien data he'd retrieved in the escape pod. It was an analysis of the remnants' behavior, detailing their spread, their patterns, and their connection to this ancient network of devices. "They're spreading," Victor muttered, piecing together the data. The remnants weren't confined to the station. They were part of something larger, a system of interconnected entities seeded across the galaxy. The destruction of the station hadn't been the end, merely a delay. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. The remnants weren't just dormant threats. They were evolving, and the aliens' cryptic warnings now made perfect sense. Humanity wasn't just at risk of encountering them. It was on a collision course with them. Victor straightened, his exhaustion replaced by a growing resolve. He wasn't a soldier, a leader, or a hero, but he was an engineer. He'd survived the station, deciphered alien technology, and come this far. He could figure this out. The chamber's doorway hissed open, and Victor stepped out into the desolate remains of Haven 42. The eerie silence was now accompanied by a subtle sense of hope. The colony wasn't beyond repair. The people might not be here, but the structures were intact, the technology salvageable. His pod systems pinged him, indicating that the docking platform had restored partial power. The alien device had triggered something, perhaps a reboot of the colony's systems. Victor hurried back to the platform, his mind racing. If the colony's communications were online, he could send a message to Earth, warning them about what he'd found. As he reached the control center, his optimism faltered. The console's display flickered weakly, showing corrupted data logs and a single partially functional transmission feed. He tapped into it, his fingers flying across the controls to stabilize the connection. "This is Victor Kerr, civilian engineer," he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through him. "I'm broadcasting from Haven 42. The colony has been abandoned, and its systems are compromised. I've encountered alien technology linked to the remnants. Humanity is not prepared for what's coming." The feed crackled, and Victor held his breath, waiting for a response. But there was only silence. He checked the transmission status. It was broadcasting, but the range was limited, likely no farther than the nearest outpost. If Earth received the message, it wouldn't be for weeks, maybe months. Victor clenched his fists. He needed to do more than warn them. He needed to act. His gaze shifted to the escape pod, now powered down and waiting on the platform. The pod's navigation systems were intact, and the map from the alien device had been uploaded to its database. He could follow the markers, investigate the signals, and learn more about the remnants before they reached humanity's doorstep. The idea was reckless, bordering on suicidal. But Victor had faced worse odds before, and this time he wasn't just fighting for his survival. He was fighting for everyone's. He climbed into the pod, reactivating its systems. The holographic map flickered to life, the red marker glowing brighter as the pod calculated its trajectory. Victor set the course, his hands steady despite the weight of what lay ahead. As the pod ascended into the dark expanse of space, Victor couldn't help but feel a spark of determination. He wasn't a hero, but he didn't need to be. He was an engineer, a problem solver, and he was going to find a way to stop the remnants before it was too late. The stars stretched out before him, endless and uncharted. Somewhere out there, answers waited, along with dangers he couldn't yet comprehend. But Victor wasn't alone. He had the aliens' knowledge, his own ingenuity, and the indomitable will to survive. For now, that would have to be enough. The escape pod hummed softly as it streaked through the black void of space, its navigation systems locked onto the red marker in the holographic map. Victor sat in the cockpit, his fingers idly tracing the edges of the controls as he stared out at the vast expanse. Each passing moment brought him closer to the unknown, and the weight of his mission pressed down on him like the artificial gravity inside the pod. The alien data he had decrypted continued to unfold on the pod's terminal, revealing fragments of a chilling story. The remnants weren't just weapons. They were the byproduct of a desperate experiment. The alien species that had created them had once ruled an empire spanning countless worlds, but their hubris had been their downfall. Faced with an existential threat, they had turned to their greatest minds to create something that could defend their civilization. Instead, they had unleashed a plague of destruction that consumed them. Victor frowned as he read through the fragmented records. The remnants had been designed to adapt, to evolve in response to their enemies. But something had gone wrong. The remnants had turned on their creators, wiping them out and scattering across the galaxy. The alien device he had found on Haven 42 was one of the last remaining attempts to control or neutralize them. The pod's proximity alert jolted Victor from his thoughts. He glanced at the display, his pulse quickening. The red marker on the map had grown larger, its coordinates now directly ahead. As the pod's thrusters slowed, the blackness of space gave way to a massive structure. It was a derelict station, far larger than Haven 42, its silhouette imposing against the backdrop of distant stars. Jagged sections of its outer hull jutted out like broken teeth, and faint, flickering lights hinted at internal power struggling to stay online. Victor's scanners pinged, picking up faint life signs within the station. He furrowed his brow. Someone, or something, was still alive inside. The pod docked with a soft hiss, its landing clamp securing to the station's airlock. Victor grabbed his tools and weapon, his heart pounding. The memories of the remnants' attack on Haven 42 were still fresh in his mind, and he wasn't about to take any chances. The airlock cycled open, and Victor stepped inside, his boots clanging against the metal floor. The station's interior was eerily similar to Haven 42, with darkened corridors and faint emergency lights casting long shadows. But this place felt older, more decayed. The walls were streaked with rust, and the air was heavy with the smell of ozone and decay. As he moved deeper into the station, his helmet's HUD picked up faint traces of movement. He followed the signals cautiously, his plasma torch held at the ready. The first thing he noticed was the silence, an oppressive, suffocating quiet that made every step sound deafening. But then came the whispers. At first, they were faint, indistinct murmurs that he could almost dismiss as his imagination. But as he ventured further, they grew louder, more coherent. "Help us," Victor froze. The voice was hauntingly familiar, echoing the cries he had heard from the alien device on Haven 42. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. No response. Only the whispers continued, growing more insistent. "Free us or destroy us." Victor tightened his grip on the torch, his eyes scanning the corridor ahead. The whispers seemed to emanate from a room at the end of the hall. As he approached, he noticed the door was ajar, a faint glow spilling out from within. He stepped inside, his breath catching. The room was a control center, its walls lined with ancient consoles and holographic displays. But the centerpiece was another alien device, larger and more elaborate than the one on Haven 42. Its glow was almost hypnotic, casting intricate patterns of light across the room. But Victor's attention was drawn to the figure slumped against the far wall. It was humanoid, but clearly not human. Its elongated limbs and translucent skin shimmered faintly in the light. The alien's eyes flickered open as Victor approached, its expression a mix of exhaustion and relief. "You came," it rasped, its voice weak but clear. Victor knelt beside the alien, his mind racing. "Who are you? What happened here?" The alien's gaze drifted to the glowing device. "We tried to stop them, but it's too late. They are everywhere." Victor felt a chill run down his spine. "The remnants?" The alien nodded weakly. "They adapt. They consume. But there is a hope." It gestured toward the device, its hand trembling. "This can stop them, but it requires the choice." Victor's heart pounded. What kind of choice? The alien's eyes locked onto his, their gaze piercing. To destroy or to control. One will end them. The other will risk everything. Victor stared at the device, his mind reeling. The whispers grew louder, as though the station itself were urging him to decide. The weight of the alien's words settled heavily on his shoulders. If he chose to destroy the device, it could wipe out the remnants for good, but it might also unleash catastrophic energy that could obliterate the station and anything nearby. If he chose to control it, he could potentially turn the remnants into an asset, but the risk of failure was unimaginable. Victor took a deep breath, his gaze shifting between the alien and the device. He had survived Haven 42, uncovered secrets he never could have imagined, and come face to face with the remnant's destructive power. Now, he faced a choice that could determine the fate of more than just humanity. Victor stood frozen, the alien's words echoing in his mind. The room felt alive, pulsing with energy from the device. The whispers had become a deafening chorus, each voice pleading for salvation or destruction. Time seemed to slow as he weighed the consequences of his choice. He turned to the alien. Its translucent skin shimmered faintly in the device's glow, its eyes holding a desperate glimmer of hope. "If I choose control," Victor asked, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him, "what happens to you? To the remnants?" The alien's gaze softened, though its voice carried an undertone of sorrow. "Control binds you. It makes you a conduit. You will hold their essence, their knowledge, their power. But the cost," it faltered, struggling for breath. "You will no longer be yourself. You will become the guardian." Victor's chest tightened. "And if I destroy it?" The alien closed its eyes, leaning back against the wall. "It ends them. Their network collapses. Their influence fades. But this station, this region of space, may not survive." Victor clenched his fists, his mind racing. Destroying the remnants would end the threat once and for all, but at the cost of countless lives, including his own. Controlling them could turn a galactic menace into a potential ally, but at the risk of losing everything he was. The alien coughed weakly, its body trembling. "You have seen what they can do. Choose wisely." Victor stepped closer to the device, the hum of its energy vibrating through the floor. He reached out, his hand hovering inches from its surface. His thoughts spiraled as memories of Haven 42 flashed before him. The chaos, the destruction, the people who had entrusted him with their lives. "This isn't just about me," he whispered, his voice almost lost in the cacophony of whispers. "It's about everyone." He took a deep breath, his resolve hardening. "I won't let them take more lives." With a swift motion, Victor pressed his hand against the device. The chamber erupted in light, blinding and all-consuming. Victor felt a surge of energy course through him, an electric storm tearing through every fiber of his being. The whispers rose to a crescendo, then abruptly stopped. When the light faded, Victor opened his eyes. The room was silent. The device had gone dark, its once vivid glow extinguished. He staggered back, his legs trembling beneath him. The alien was gone. Only a faint outline on the wall remained, a trace of its presence etched into the station's history. Victor's gaze swept the room, his mind struggling to comprehend what had happened. His visor chimed softly, drawing his attention to the pod's terminal. The holographic map had updated, showing a ripple spreading outward from the station's location. As the ripple expanded, the red markers blinked out one by one, replaced by empty space. The remnants were gone. Victor's chest heaved as relief and exhaustion washed over him. He had done it. The galaxy was safe, at least for now. But the cost was undeniable. The station systems were failing, its structure groaning under the strain of the device's collapse. Victor stumbled back to the pod, the flickering lights guiding his path. As the pod's hatch sealed behind him, Victor slumped into the pilot's seat. His hands trembled as he initiated the launch sequence. The station silhouette shrank in the viewport, a crumbling monument to the battle that had just unfolded. The pod's navigation systems plotted a course for the nearest human outpost. Victor leaned back, staring at the stars. He had survived, but the experience had changed him. The whispers still lingered in his mind, faint echoes of the alien knowledge he had touched. He thought of the alien's final words. "You will no longer be yourself." Victor clenched his fists, his gaze hardening. He had made his choice, and he would live with it. The remnants were gone, but the galaxy was vast, and there were still mysteries waiting to be uncovered. As the pod drifted into the endless expanse, Victor allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. He wasn't a hero, but he had done what needed to be done. And though the stars stretched out before him, infinite and unknown, he felt a strange sense of peace. For now, that was enough.